Hello, my respected viewers. It's George from Ireland back again. I'm discussing this rather contentious topic about whether the United Kingdom ought to send those who are applying for asylum to Rwanda to be processed. So, this was a policy that the British government came up with a few months ago. Now, note this is a reserved matter. So, Westminster controls this for the entire of the United Kingdom, not just England. So, for Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and England, Westminster controls that. And indeed, when some immigration enforcement officers in Glasgow were trying to detain some illegal immigrants, the Scots authorities refused to cooperate. And indeed, Nicola Sturgeon hailed the fact that local people frustrated the immigration officers who were trying to perform their lawful duties. It's quite shocking that this woman, the First Minister, solicitor herself, should encourage people to break the law and to frustrate officers who are trying to carry out their duty. So you might disagree with the asylum policy and all that, but you should nevertheless uphold the law. So anyway, why is the UK government coming up with this? Partly because coronavirus is over, nobody's talking about it, nobody's talking about a new lockdown or anything like that. And so travellers got back to normal. You can go to all sorts of countries without needing to show any proof of a negative test or vaccination or passenger locator form. So as people have got moving again, more asylum seekers are coming to the coast of France, to the English Channel, and crossing illegally to the United Kingdom. And of course, these boats sometimes capsize, people sometimes drown, and they can't all be saved, despite the best efforts of the Royal Navy and the Royal National Lifeboat Institute. So, it'll be dozens coming a week, but Her Majesty's government is anxious because they think if it carries on like this, in a few months it'll be hundreds each week, and in a few years it'll be thousands each week. So something's got to be done to this to stop people drowning in the English Channel. Now, I know some people say, well, why don't you just fly them across? Well, because they don't have visas, because they're illegal. They're often illegally in France as well. They're coming from war-torn countries. Could be Afghanistan, could be Syria, elsewhere, various countries. And do they actually come from Syria? Do they actually come from Afghanistan? Sometimes we don't actually know. You first of all have to identify the person. What is your name, date of birth, place of birth? Do you have a passport? Sometimes they destroyed it. Is it a fake passport or whatever? Are you really from that country? You could be from a country where there is no conflict. You might be Lebanese rather than Syrian and just want to come to the UK as an economic migrant. Now, it's totally respectable to be an economic migrant. I've arguably been one several times myself. And obviously, the UK, like most other countries, needs immigration, and immigration can be magnificent. But there are some downsides to it, and not everybody is wonderful, and it has to be the right level of desirable individuals. And arguably, the UK doesn't have enough immigration, which is why there are labour shortages in certain sectors. They can't get enough people to work as chambermaids or fruit pickers and all sorts. Like 50% of nurses in the United Kingdom are foreign. So the National Health Service would have collapsed decades ago if it wasn't for immigrant nurses. So people's lives are saved every single day by immigrants in the UK. It's saved on a huge scale. But anyway, so the idea of sending people to Rwanda is then they won't be crossing the channel illegally, and it's not quite as attractive as to be processed in Rwanda, which can take months, can take over a year. And if their claim is accepted, flown to the United Kingdom and granted asylum in the UK. If not, deported back to their country of origin. Some people, of course, refuse to say their country of origin. You have to determine they're actually telling the truth. So that is the Rwanda plan. It was announced just in April this year that they've been musing about it in the previous year. Now, Australia tried a similar scheme with success about 20 years ago. John Howard introduced it, and it was highly controversial. Send them for offshore processing. Moreover, it's a bit cheaper as well. So it stopped them actually crossing the channel, and also less likely to want to come to the UK if they know they're going to spend a few months or even more in Rwanda. You don't like it there? You can leave any time. Even you're a detention centre in the United Kingdom, you can leave any day you want. You just say you're willing to go home. You sign that, you'll be on a plane that night. Anyway, so it was appealed up to the UK Supreme Court because they had to adjudicate this. It's a justiciable matter. Did the government act lawfully? This is called judicial review. Just because the executive does something, that doesn't automatically make it lawful. And the judges in the UK Supreme Court found that indeed it was lawful, that the correct procedure was followed, that the Home Secretary was intra vires, as in within her lawful powers to do this. However, many people have castigated it. The Church of England bishops have denounced it, as they often do, as the Tory government has said, well, they've got no workable solutions. Prince Charles has said it's appalling, but why should his opinion count for any more, any less than anybody else? And he ought to keep stum. He ought to be above politics and not be entering the fray on a heated political issue. I mean, perhaps he'd like to accommodate these asylum seekers in one of his many enormous houses. Fine, that would be really doing something. Put your money where your mouth is. But he's not, and he's never going to give a penny of his huge fortune to try and resolve this problem. Anyways, the government's actually got to deal with real world problems. It keeps the cost lower, and actually it's funding a less economically developed Commonwealth country, Rwanda. I know a former German and Belgian colony, but uses English as official language, joined the Commonwealth over 20 years ago. Zambia has even expressed an interest in being a processing centre for some of these asylum seekers. Anyway, this is a matter which touches on the European Convention of Human Rights, which was signed in 1950. The United Kingdom is, of course, a party to it, and indeed British lawyers were instrumental in drafting it. But an appeal has gone to the European Court of Human Rights at Strasbourg. So remember, the European Court of Human Rights is not an EU court. You might be confusing with the Court of Justice of the European Union in Luxembourg. So it's about 45 countries are signed up to the European Convention of Human Rights. Every country in Europe, with the single exception of Belarus. Not a company you'd wish to keep. Russia, it seems, going to be out of it as of September, though. Anyway, so the European Court of Human Rights granted an injunction, temporary delay, whilst they look into the matter further, saying that the human rights of these people might be breached. Are conditions in these Rwanda detention centres good enough? Are they going to be adequately accommodated, fed, provided with decent medical care, and whatever, treated humanely? And if not, then they can't go. So it might be ultimately judged illegal. So Anyway, the Home Secretary Priti Patel is really eager for this to go ahead. The first flight to Rwanda was going to have, I think, only 7 people on it. I mean, it didn't take off in the end. So she'd like a plane to go with even just one passenger to prove it's working, to establish the principle. The longer this is delayed with more legal battles, the less likely it's actually to happen. It'll play well with a certain section of Middle Britain, with some Conservative voters who are worried about rising illegal immigration. And the Conservatives pointing out that Labour is the party of illegal immigration. You don't want the law to be upheld. I mean, which is obviously grossly unfair on legal immigrants, those who apply to come here lawfully. Now, there is a right to seek asylum, and people don't necessarily have to claim asylum in the first country they go to. It obviously begs the question, if you crossed a dozen safe countries, why didn't you stop there if it's really about asylum? Why didn't you go anywhere else? Well, exactly. Lisa Madeline says we're paying a lot of money to France to prevent this, and they're not. Yeah. Why do these people want to come to the United Kingdom more so than France or many other countries? Partly because English is the language they're more likely to speak. Moreover, they might have friends and relatives in the UK. I don't know whether the benefits are more generous in the United Kingdom or not. It might be because the UK's got no ID cards. Now, you might just want to blend in and just work illegally, or you might want to actually claim asylum, be in a detention centre. Of course, you might lose your case and be deported. You get a couple of appeals. We can delay it for a couple of years. You might be granted exceptional leave to remain, even if you lose your case. Mostly they're young men. It's obviously more difficult for an elderly person, an infirm person, those with little children to move. So, I mean, I think in principle, if it is lawful and if they are going to be reasonably treated in Rwanda, it would be a good idea. But it remains to be seen whether it actually is lawful and is going to be efficient in Rwanda. Thanks for watching. Bye.